So, what is Thread exactly? With what purpose did you start the company a few years ago?
So, to put kind of a long story into as a condensed way as possible for you, Thread is effectively a social enterprise which focuses on publishing, production, media, and consulting, all of which is aimed at Generation Z. The central tenet of the company is a website, which is thread.com, which focuses on insight, analysis, and impacting as many like-minded people as possible while having daily coverage of kind of news, analysis, insights on all things social change. As well on the website, the idea is to turn online education into offline activism. So online education can be thought of as anything you can do from your sofa, right from here. So raising funds, raising awareness, learning about different causes, and kind of anything you can do from your phone, all the way through to offline activism, which is the volunteering, the protesting, and then eventually the kind of change at a governmental level. So that's the idea with thread.com, the website. The second kind of pillar of Thread is what we call the Thread community. So between our social medias across mine and Threads, we have around 200,000 followers, plus a really kind of tight, great group of ambassadors, interns, Discord moderators, remote writers who aren't in the office, but they're part of the Thread community in a kind of big sense. And that's what we like to call our change maker network, because it's this network of like-minded young people who all kind of have the same idea around social change and are trying to make a difference. And that's our change maker network. And the third pillar of Thread is Thread consulting side. The idea with the consulting is that because we're a Generation Z brand, we speak the language of Generation Z, which not many companies do. We are purely a Generation Z team, which not many companies are, and we focus on, and I'll say it for a third time, we focus on Generation Z trends and things that are culturally relevant to Generation Z. The idea there is that companies who don't have those three characteristics will come to us asking about information, buying habits, the trends happening in Generation Z, as well as within social change. And we will consult companies on that kind of information. That's what Thread is now. To go back to kind of how it came about and why it started, effectively, I always feel weird saying this, but at kind of 9 years old, I had an idea for a website called IcoolKid. And the premise there was, me and my mates didn't feel like there was a website about cool things to do in London. And we realized that because we couldn't find one. So I decided to do a show and tell at that school about a website called IcoolKid, about cool things to do in London. And then 3 years later, when I was 11, 12, we made it into a real website. In May of 2016, we hired our first employee. And then in May of 2017, we hard launched the website. Then, as the platform IcoolKid started to grow, and my Instagram started to grow at the time because I was doing lots of acting and music and whatnot, I started to realize that people would reach out to me with these really kind of intense, deep moral dilemmas. I mean, so the most poignant examples that kind of I always remember are, there were kind of gay teenagers in Russia who couldn't come out to their family because of their situation, or people who didn't believe in the same faith as their parents, didn't know how to tell them. Or, young kind of teenage girls who were using using rubbish as hygiene products. These kind of really kind of serious moral dilemmas that, because of kind of where I was living and kind of, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a relatively privileged household in the sense that I wasn't able to kind of experience that. So I was trying to represent Generation Z, but I had no clue as to what the kind of other Generation Zers around the world were going through. So I soon realized that something needed to change, and me with my little Instagram with a couple thousand followers and my website about cool things to do in London wasn't really making that change. So that's when I decided to turn that privilege of having an Instagram and having a website into purpose. And I like to talk about that concept of
and that happened in 2020, right?
More or less. So we kind of started to realize this towards the end of 2019, and then around beginning of 2020 throughout June, kind of beginning of 2020 until June 2020 was when we were thinking about the idea for Thread, which is how that transformation from IcoolKid to Thread now happened.
Makes sense.
The four things that changed mainly were the name, obviously, from IcoolKid to Thread. I wasn't a kid. Cool wasn't that cool anymore, and it kind of just wasn't really working with I. So something did change. We refocused the website, so it wasn't going to be about cool things to do in London. It's now about social change. We repositioned the demographic, so it kind of grew up with me in the sense that it used to be 8 to 15-year-olds. Now we kind of like to say 16 to 25, but we've got younger and older readers anyway. And the full thing we did was we added the consulting side. So we branched out into consulting.
I guess that's also what drives revenues, that allows you to do what you're willing to do.
Well, exactly. So the way that we see the website is we kind of do it for the good of social change. So we didn't really feel it would be right to, I sound really magnanimous saying this, that's not the intention, but we didn't think it would be right to have ads on the website because that just wasn't, it defeats the point. You shouldn't be trying to monetize on social change. So the way that we're able to do it and be able to hire the kind of the awesome writing team and publishing team who work on the website is through the consulting business. So that was kind of, we needed that source of revenue to be able to fund the almost charity side of it.
Yeah, going back to Gen Z, we have a lot of assumptions towards them, right? They're lazy, they play video games all day, they may be not able to drive change because they're too young. So what are your thoughts on that? And yeah, what is your message?
So I think one of the things is, one of the biggest stereotypes is that talking about that short attention span, which I think is actually quite interesting. And the way I like to see it is it's not about having a short attention span, but it's about having a really acute filter to what you want to pay attention to. So the number that gets thrown around is like 6 seconds, 7 seconds, 8 seconds, which is very short. But the way I see it is it's 6 seconds to decide whether we want to pay attention, and then if we do, then you can have our attention for 2 hours and we'll listen as long as we want to. But I like to see it as a quick attention span, the quick kind of attention deciding, effectively. I also want to say that because as a generation, we're the first generation to grow up with the digital world, the digital era. We are almost digitally dependent. I mean, I think it's like 60% of Generation Z say that they feel uncomfortable if they don't have their phone near them for something like 4 hours. Like, it is nuts how digitally dependent we are.
Absolutely.
But what's come about from that is this rise of collectivism, which kind of the older generations don't really see or don't really understand, because activism to them looks like long forging, kind of years and years of forging kind of like-minded people and connections in order to drive social change, which kind of worked. But I mean, there's pros and cons to it. It took kind of 13 months to make the Montgomery bus boycott kind of a reality, starting with Rosa Parks' infamous active resistance. And all the things like that meant that it take a very long time to make social change. But because we're digital dependents, because we kind of, well, from adults' perspective, we spend our whole time playing video games, because we're on our computers, our phones, Instagrams, and TikToks the whole time. What's happened is that actively we've been able to make collectivism real and really take advantage of collectivism. And admittedly, although a tweet isn't going to change the world, a well-placed and a well-worded tweet can spread beliefs that will and spread awareness that will. So while we are on our phones the whole time, we're actually making change at a speed unprecedented to any other generation has before us. So when people say, what are you doing? You're not doing anything. You're kind of just sitting there on your phone. Well, actually, we're making change at triple the rate that you ever could. So I don't want to be arrogant on behalf of Generation Z, but yeah, we're harnessing that power of collectivism.
That makes a lot of sense. And maybe what you're referring to is also, that ratio of the amount of time that you spend doing something and the impact. And I think this is maybe something very difficult to understand for a lot of people, because we're used to, spend hours of studying for school, earning a diploma, maybe applying for a job, a master's, and maybe we can have an impact. That's basically what the society tells us right now. But as you mentioned many times in other interviews, you can have an impact right now. There's so many ways to educate yourself online. There's so many softwares that exist to help you develop some skills. You can do things on your own. So back to your platform, back to Thread. How are you empowering people, young people, Gen Z, to find what they're the most passionate about, expose them to topics that are important to their generation, and also help them have an impact? How do you manage to do that?
The way that I like to think about it is, and I sound like a broken record because I'll say this so much, but global change isn't going to happen through one person, one leader. Global change happens through local change on a global level. So when you can get the word out to people all around the world to incite and inspire this local change that they can make, when everyone in the world does that, that's when you have global change. because social change happens at different speeds, at different scales, in different countries, and every country is on its own level of social change, where kind of Middle Eastern countries are fighting for things that the UK and the US has dealt with a long time ago. That's kind of that different levels of social change. That's the example I like to give. The way that we inspire and impact is by giving opportunity and raising awareness and spreading content to people, and hence inspiring them to make that local change, because global change happens as a matter of local change on a global scale.
Absolutely.
So the way that we inspire and empower these people is by giving them access to and knowledge about Olympiads, about scholarships, about fundraising opportunities, and then the thing we're doing now is we're setting up a Discord where we're going to have 20 NGOs. I mean, the likes of Global Citizen is going to be on our Discord, and that's going to put them directly in touch with young people, young like-minded people, so that they can have as direct an impact as possible. So the answer is we're empowering young people to make change through knowledge and through opportunity.
That's wonderful. And what kind of topics do you have on the Thread platform? Technology, maybe hustle, change. Yeah. How do you choose these topics, and why do you think they're relevant to this generation?
So effectively, the central tenet is always going to be change, social change at any scale. So the way that we choose those sub-channels, it kind of all revolves around change in the first place, but the way we choose those is because we think that the biggest things that are happening are the science change or the tech change or the kind of the fashion, culture, kind of, and all the other kind of subjects. And that's because we can't really group the social change happening on an influencer level in pop culture land, effectively, and the social change happening in the tech and science land when you're, building these little robots that clean up oil spills across the ocean. So effectively, it's all about the same thing, but in different subcategories, and that's how we choose them. The other things on the website that don't fall into those subcategories are things like the hustle section, the Thread 100 as well. So actually, to do the Thread 100 first, I'm really quite proud of it. It's effectively a list of 100 movements, entrepreneurs, brands, which we really think are doing a great job, and we think deserve to have the light shone on them, because we think they're doing kind of great work and they deserve some limelight.
Absolutely.
With the hustle section, that's actually where we think that we're giving the most opportunity, and to go back to the earlier question, empowering people the most, because that's where we're really teaching you and telling you how to make a change and how you're going to make that hustle happen. And within that, we have a really great opportunity to be able to link up with a guy called Dan Kiernan, who's works at the Oxford Said Business School, so kind of super knowledgeable guy. And he is our kind of social change agony uncle, like careers and social change agony uncle. And it's awesome to think about it. But on Thread, you can kind of email in to Dan Kiernan and literally ask him anything about careers and social change. And he'll reply. I'm convinced that he just lives on his email because he replies so quickly. But and he'll ask about, you can effectively, that's probably the rawest form of that empowering kind of concept, is that you can ask this incredible guy about anything to do with social change careers, and you'll get an answer relatively quickly. So that's another cool part about Thread.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically what you're saying is that it's easy for anyone who's on the platform to, for example, have access to what's been talked about on the platform. So if there's like a cool thing happening, you can directly reach out to maybe the contributor, and she or he will help out. That's what you're saying, basically?
So effectively, we like to give as much information as possible around all aspects, and if you want to do that further research, you definitely can. But more specifically, with the kind of the back and forth, is around social change careers, because I've spoken to lots of people who have no idea how to get employed nowadays because of the massive changes with the gig economy and whatnot, and especially they have no idea how to get employed in the land of social change, because it's a pretty well-known route how to get into finance or banking or law or medicine, but no one really knows. I want to become a garbage redesigner. I want to become a rewilder. Like that kind of, no one in school tells you how to do that. No career coach can do that from your university or from your school. So that's kind of why we have Dan Kiernan, is because it's a whole new world of employment which he's super knowledgeable on and people want to understand.
Makes sense. So to anyone who would be skeptical about the fact that most of your contributors are from Gen Z, that maybe they lack the perspective or the experience to talk about these important topics, what do you say?
I think the first thing I want to say is that Generation Z is what makes Thread. That's our spin, that's our style, and that's why I think it works, is because we have that for Generation Z by Generation Z. Also, when I say that, is that it's worth saying that our Generation Zers are by nature at the top end of Generation Z. They're kind of young. They've graduated from journalism school. They are not kids in the sense that they're not kind of still in high school. They're kind of professional journalists. So I would like to kind of add that in. There's a lot of due diligence that goes into the website, and a lot of due diligence goes into the stories, and I like to think they're quite good.
Thank you.
Of a good professional standard, yeah.
Makes sense. So Thread is available in 17 different languages. Where is your audience from exactly?
I think it's first worth mentioning that as a company which tries to access Generation Z, 90% of Generation Z live in developing and emerging economies. So if we only wrote it in English and we only kept it in English, we're not going to reach a good amount of Generation Z, and especially not going to reach the Generation Zers who are going to make the most change. Because the most social change right now, the quickest and the most profound, is happening in those developing and emerging economies. The biggest kind of countries we have are the obvious ones, the US's, the UK and Canada mainly. Then we quickly realized when we started translating it, we got Japan in there quite quickly, Germany in there now. And that was because we translated into Japanese and German. But what really blows my mind is that we're in 180 plus different countries. But I mean, countries I couldn't even point out on a map or couldn't even spell. I mean, there's the Tajikistan, all the stans are on there. Like South Sudan is there, El Salvador, Fiji. What really blows my mind is actually with the newsletter. We have a weekly newsletter, and we can see where people come from. Someone from Bhutan signed up to our newsletter like yesterday, I think it was. Stuff like that seriously blows my mind. But I actually think that we find it's a quite nice way of measuring our success almost, because we don't measure our success by how many readers we get or how much money we make, because we didn't set out to get readers and make money. We set out to inspire and impact the most amount of like-minded people possible. So when we see that we're in just under 200 countries, that for us is actually quite important. It's almost quite emotional in the sense that you see that you're getting eyeballs in a lot of different places, which is the idea.
Thank you. That's honestly mind-blowing. And yeah, that leads us to the question of impact. So we mentioned the different kind of impacts that you have, but how do you measure them? And how do you make sure that you understand your impact, and how do you set up goals for the coming years?
Yeah. Well, I think kind of just to reiterate what I said, lots of people measure their impact in how much money they make and how many viewers they get.
Yeah.
But no one starts off a company by saying, I want to get a huge amount of viewers, even on anything. Like, that's just not why a company starts. That's not what something is passionate about. So we kind of used to measure our impact on kind of how many viewers we got, but we realized that that's not the case. We like to now measure our success on how much impact we have. So although it's a lot harder to kind of measure, there's no Google Analytics on how many people are being inspired by you. The way that I like to see it is every now and again, I'll get some DMs being like, you really inspired me to do this. Or one of the most profound things that I saw was one of our now ambassadors, a guy called Jay, who lives in the Philippines, said that I kind of inspired him to set up a campaign in order to get fresh water to their schools. Because only recently had they had fresh water in their homes. Now they're trying to campaign to get it into their schools. And I thought, that is really what Thread is about, is someone in the Philippines getting their local change. And then if someone in every country does that, that's when you have global change. So that's how we like to measure our impact.
So final question, how would you define Thread in 3 words?
I think the idea behind Thread would be, the 3 words would be change at scale. I think that's the idea behind it. You want to inform, inspire, and impact as many people to make that change. And then when you have lots of people doing it, that's change at scale.
Definitely,
so there you go.
Definitely. Thank you. Last comments for the audience, last thoughts to people who are watching today.
I think one of the biggest things I like to say around entrepreneurship, but it works with everything, is don't be afraid of failure, but be terrified of regret.
Absolutely.
And the example I like to give is with Starbucks. There were cafes before Starbucks, and I can bet a lot of money on the fact that someone was sitting in a queue for their coffee saying, damn, I wish there were sofas and chairs in this. But one person decided to make a cafe with sofas and chairs, and then they made Starbucks, because that's what it is. That's how Starbucks is created. So the people, the Jeff Bezoses, the Elon Musks, the Evan Spiegels of the world, aren't the people who come up with the ideas. They're the people who come up with the ideas and execute on the ideas. So that's kind of what I like to think about is don't fear failure, but be terrified of regret. Nowadays, there is no easier way to start a business, a website, a company. For the same cost 10 years ago to fail one company, you can fail 10 companies now, which I think is incredible and really shows that there's no better time to start than right now.
Thank you. It was wonderful to benefit from all your insights, and yeah, good luck for whatever next I'll be watching.
That's very kind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.